Meeting of agencies and affairs to order. First up will be approval of the agenda. Motion and support. Additions or deletions? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, the same. Motion carried. Next up is public comment. Public, you have 5 minutes to address the board. Step up, please, and give us your name. Hello, public. Quiet Monday morning. Public comments closed. Moving on to minutes of the January 12th meeting. Motion and support. Corrections needed? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, the same. Motion carried. Appointments. When I looked last night, there were none unless it's changed. My slow lagging computer here. Any appointments, anybody? If you got yours up, okay. Next up is the Enterprise Group. Biannual report with the Imagine Jackson presentation. Debbie Kelly and Tim Rogers.
Debbie Kelly is my technical brain. Good morning, Tim Rogers, President of the Enterprise Group. Wanted to share with you a PowerPoint that actually we walked through our EG board last week and the Chamber board the week before. It's a good summary of our year-end accomplishments, some good positive numbers for Jackson County, and also mentions a couple challenges going forward that I want to highlight. We also distributed this morning our year-end investor guide. It basically is a more detailed summary of what we're going to walk through this morning, the programs, accomplishments, and the agencies that we staff. So let's start this morning with this. The Imagine Jackson campaign was our 3-year campaign that we undertook in late 2012. So we're entering the 3rd year of that economic development campaign. And we just kind of want to talk about some of the things that have happened. Oops, what happened here, Debbie? Advance over here.
Actually, I thought we just clicked on it. Oh, let's see. Adam, can we borrow you for a moment?
It worked this morning,
It
Adam.
did. I'm not sure why it's not advancing for me. The left one?
Just the left one, okay.
Sorry.
Okay, this is a very, very busy map. It's basically the metropolitan statistical areas for the whole United States. And those are population areas that are defined by the federal government, of which there's a lot of data kept, census data, economic data. And this is actually the GDP data for all those MSAs. It's a little hard to see where Jackson is, but Jackson's one of the smaller MSAs in the United States. The latest GDP data is for year-end 2013. And you'll see on this list that Jackson actually had the 3rd fastest growing economy in the state of Michigan at the end of the year 2013. And we're behind some, what I would say is unlikely candidates. You typically think we'd be behind Grand Rapids or Kalamazoo, but it's actually Monroe County and Niles-Benton Harbor County. Those aren't real dollar numbers, those are percent of growth, but it's still an important measurement for us because it shows how much people are actually investing, especially our existing industry in Jackson during that period, 2013. A couple of numbers here, we're going to break them down by 2013 and then 2014. At the end of 2013, the business investment that we track, which is primarily manufacturing and some larger commercial, was over $138 million. In 2014, that figure jumped up to over $200 million, which by different people rank counties all the time. One of the normal or more watched reports is the Area Development Report, which is they do a lot of compilation of economic development agencies and regions across the United States. Our 2013 numbers show Jackson County ranked 55th overall, 11th regionally, and 23rd within our population categories for MSAs. So our numbers look pretty good, but I want to talk a little bit as we go forward. That's primarily from our existing business base, so it's a lot of growth from our existing companies. One reason that happens is we spend a lot of time doing business retention. I know many of you know Amy and Debbie pretty well. Amy and Debbie do a great job of scheduling retention calls. We do over 100 retention calls a year on Jackson County businesses. They are our primary, if you want to call it, cornerstone of business growth in the county. We want to know what they're thinking, what they're talking about, what they need, where their challenges and opportunities are. And the only way you really find that out is to go out and spend some time with them and sit down and talk with them. Many times we take a state of a Michigan MEDC representative with us to talk about if there's state issues or state programs that they have been taking advantage of or maybe they could take advantage of. That's particularly relevant right now with a lot of employment type programs that are trying to be devised by the state of Michigan to help people fill a lot of the job openings that we have. But of those retention calls during 2013 and 2014, those resulted in commitments of 578 new jobs from that growth that we talked about. We don't spend a lot of time on business attraction. We're going to talk a little bit about that as we move forward. But one of the things that we wanted to share with you here is kind of the inverse funnel effect of doing business attraction. It takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of money, and your success rate is very narrow or very slim when you get down to the bottom. So for 2013 and 2014, we responded to 107 attraction or requests for information on location. We call them RFIs, requests for inquiries. Of those, we actually submitted 22. So when we looked at the parameters that are in those documents and said, do we really qualify for these? Can we really fit this project? Do we have space, buildings, land, the right infrastructure requirements? There were only 22 that we really felt like we had the right kind of information for. And of those 22, we actually had 2 site visits. So you can tell the amount of information that goes into those. You start very broad and you end up very specific about whether you even qualify to get a site visit. This is really important, and I know we've talked about this before. Usually when we get these RFIs, they could be anything from a couple paragraph emails to a document that might be 24, 25 pages long, and we usually get about a day to respond to them. So I was telling the board last week, there can be things as specific as how long does it take a fire truck to get from the nearest fire station to the piece of property that you're proposing, and how many calls in that direction have there been. And those things are where you got to have pretty good relationships with local units of government so you can get that information in a timely fashion. Another one that we recently had wanted the ACT scores for not only every district in our county, but every district that touched our county, which we don't really know why that filter is, but I guess it shows a level of education achievement that they want to know. And that's a little more difficult to get in 24 hours. So that's one of those things you have to do ahead of time. Staff spends a lot of time trying to, if you will, prioritize those data sets and working in the units of local government to get those and keep us out in front of those. The couple of the things that we do in attraction are rather limited, but they are related either to local assets we have or to the fact that our proximity to Chicago is close enough that we don't have to spend a lot of time traveling there. Our partners out at the track at MIS have been very helpful with us and with the state of Michigan. We do host site location consultants usually at the August race. They come for a weekend, they see the county, they see the opportunities that are here. Then we teach them a little bit about, Josh does a great job out there about exposing them to the inner workings of MIS, which is a big business obviously, and all the engineering that goes on behind the scenes in the race during race weekend. We also work regionally with our partners in Lenawee, Livingston, Monroe, Hillsdale, and Washtenaw. We have been doing once a year a regional site location familiarity tour where we have requested from the state some money from their marketing program to actually bring people in. This last August we did it, and we had some pretty high-ranking people with business leaders in Michigan that helped us host it. Their director and several of their key board members actually met with the site location consultants and talked about doing business in Michigan since the changes over the last several years in our business climate issues. And as you know, our staff actually is the contract staff for the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority. We spend a lot of time on that. Actually, we spent a lot of time in the past several months working on the Acme property and also on Great Lakes Industries, who has recently purchased the Harvard Industries property and is doing some redevelopment for their own purposes, but also we're hoping that there'll be an opportunity to build some new buildings anywhere up to about 50,000 square feet on some property there that Great Lakes Industries put on the market. And one of the last things, and it's probably the least recognized, but we've spent a lot of time trying to be out telling our story and being more transparent about how we operate. I'm not a great social media person. Debbie really is. Every one of those things that we have talked about, site selectors live in the Twitter world. They pick that information up, they read it, and they move on. It's not a thing where, you know, they want to see a 3 or 4 page report. Basically, they want to see the good things that are happening here and where there's opportunities. So we spend a lot of time pushing that information out. Last year, we did, and would encourage you to come to them this year. I think the first one will probably be in March. Coffees with the CEO, where we just sit down for about an hour and a half, and talk about subjects, things that we're working on, items that are important to us, how we impact marketing or site selection or data gathering. It's really an interesting mix of people. We send the invitation out to all our investors, so there might be local government or business people or not-for-profits. And it ends up generally in a pretty good conversation about economic development. Like I said, it's usually supposed to be about an hour, and some of them lasted a couple hours just because of the conversation and the sharing of information that goes on there. Couple challenges I want to bring before you. We talked a lot about this at our board meeting last week and at the Chamber Board 2 weeks ago. In those retention calls and in those attraction issues, the number one issue that we have to address in this community and across the region, the Midwest, even the United States, but primarily the Midwest is where our focus is skilled workforce availability. We talk about this every time I come before you. That problem has not gone away. It's gotten worse, if you will. Right now, you can go to any job search site, South Central Michigan Works, any of the local newspapers, and you can just list welders, CNC machinists, fabricators. We even have an informal email system where we share those opportunities and openings. This is the number one issue. And I was in a meeting 10 days ago, I guess, with Michigan Manufacturers Association, our own JAMA, Jackson Area Manufacturers Association. Where this trend line is going to be even more of a challenge for us. Businesses are reporting to the Michigan Manufacturers Association that over the next 7 to 8 years, anywhere depending on the business segment, 50 to 60% of their employees will be entering retirement age. And yeah, Steve. By me?
By youth.
Oh, youth.
It's seen as, you know.
Right.
That it's more.
Absolutely.
And that we need to get the opportunity also.
Right.
For people to get involved.
And that, I think that's one of the things that we really want to focus on a little bit. The JAMA programs that have started actually in kindergarten and first grade and run through adult learning the ones that have been brought into the school system have worked really, really well. The challenge is trying to find the resources to expand them, to be able to put, for instance, engineering as elementary in every classroom. And it's not because of pushback at the school district, it's just a resource issue. And so that resource issue is not only at that level, but one of the things that, and probably click forward here, which this is to your point, Steve, there's been several different studies that have said over the next 10 to 15 years, the majority of job openings will be in middle-skilled jobs. That, in a broad definition, is pretty much anything that's not a 4-year degree. So that could be associate's degree, it could be an American Welding Society certificate, it could be diesel mechanic certificate, but those jobs categories are where there's going to be a huge need. And we haven't done a good job as society in general, but a community about saying where there are career paths. And I know, I'm not bringing it to you to say it's your challenge, but I think that groups like the EG have to do more about familiarity. This was one of our attempts. We talked about this. This has been relatively successful, our early middle college for manufacturing careers, the skilled areas, which this year focused on welding and CNC machining. Next year, it will expand into engineering. This year was Jackson College was our college partner. Next year, Baker College will be included in that, so those juniors and seniors will be taking engineering classes through Baker College while they're also enrolled in high school. It's just one very, very small piece. But to Steve, to your point, one of the things that came up in that when we had our first meeting, this was approved in July to begin the school year in August. So we had a very compressed time frame. But when we had counselors, parents, students, principals, some superintendents, and business people all in a room together, your very subject came up, that business people are saying to parents and counselors, you don't understand what the manufacturing world looks like today. It doesn't look like it did 5 years ago or 10 years ago. Our career paths are much different now. You have to not only be a CNC machinist, but you have to be a good communicator because you have to work with the engineer. The jobs have changed so drastically that they have a lot more elements to them than they used to. And what we found, and this has been a great example, and I'm not going to say that early middle college is the perfect model to solve the diesel mechanic issue or the IT issue or the construction trades issue, but what this has indicated to us is it's about getting the right people in the room to have the right conversations and share that knowledge. Business people's world has changed so drastically, they really haven't shared that with education. And, but we haven't given them a venue or an avenue to do that. And I think what we've learned from this process is we've got to be a lot better about communicating those things. So anyway, the first year of early middle college, 9 districts participated. All the districts in the county actually have approved early middle college. The 9 districts are just that's where the students came from this year. 19 students and 12 employers. And those 12 employers are putting $6,000 a student into an account to help pay for that associate's degree. And that 5th year state aid, that $7,200 is going into that same account. Those districts are taking that money for that 5th year senior and putting it in that account to pay towards that associate's degree. So it really has been a partnership between business and education. This is just kind of a big summary of what I was just mentioned. These skilled training needs are just not in manufacturing. Every conversation I have, you can ask a banker how hard it is to get it and keep a teller. Mike and I were talking about diesel mechanics even for the county road department. Same challenge. IT across the board, whether that's in healthcare or whether that's across the street at Miramed, they have the same challenge. And we have to start figuring out what are those models that work to keep those young people here, get them those extra credentials and education so that they're not saying, oh, I have a high school diploma and I'm ready to go to work, because that's not the world of work that we have today. But business people have to figure out how to get engaged. So I've basically challenged our board going forward in our next 3 years. This is an area that we have to do more in. And frankly, we challenged the chamber board to do the same thing. So, and I don't know how, I guess it's relatively unusual since the chamber and the EG separated many years ago, but on February 27th, our 2 boards are going to meet jointly. Mindy and I have constantly go to these meetings and people go, what is the business community going to do? And, until our boards take the position that this is the priority issue and we have to be more engaged and have to identify more resources from the business side of the house, it's hard for staff people to go out and take the lead. And between the 2 presentations last week and the week before, I think this joint board meeting coming up at the end of the month will be one of those opportunities for that group to say, okay, what is it we want to do? What role do we want to take? I don't see them saying it's not a role we want to take. They just have to do a better job of defining it and saying, are we going to go out and get those resources necessary to move this issue forward? The other one is, and we talked a lot about this at the Enterprise Group Board meeting last week too, is for as much land, and I know I've brought this to you before, but for as much land as we have in this county, we don't have any sites that would be by definition called shovel ready. And that means, I'm going to kind of give you a check-off list. We have a lot of sites that have some of these things, but we don't have one site that has all these things. And one of our biggest challenges going forward and having a community conversation about where is it we want to have growth, how do all the township master plans fit together, How are we going to get infrastructure to those places? I mean, this not only fits with the road discussions going on at the state and local level, but also how do we extend water lines? We have a lot of good potential areas, but we don't have somewhere that if somebody came to town to me today and said, I need 150 acres and I need all these things and I want to start building in 60 days, we don't have it. And I had a person in the community say to me, well, we don't need to do business attraction, then your numbers just show, look how good expansion's been to us. And my response to that is, also look at who's taken up the property and built new facilities. It's all local businesses who are growing and need a new space. If you look at the industrial park in Blackman Township, it's full of Jackson County companies who needed a new facility. So this is one of those things we have to have a broader conversation about. I believe our board feels we're in the position to at least be a part of that conversation. There's many other partners, you all, the County Planning Commission, the townships and the township supervisors, city government. But if we don't have this, my concern is, what do we do when the next business says we need 50 acres? And if we don't have it for them, they're going to go look somewhere else. And that's our fault as a community. So this is an issue that there's no quick solution to. There's no easy resource base to go and get money for. But if we don't do it, the neighbor down the road does, we're going to start losing opportunities. So this is something we really, as a county, need to come together on. And it doesn't mean it will be all pleasant conversations. I'm sure you all have dealt with a lot of infrastructure issues on a countywide basis and can appreciate the intricacies of having this conversation. But if we don't have it, we're never going to get to the point of trying to come up with a solution. So, last slide. It's been interesting, the Economic Development and Workforce Coordinating Council, which is on the Jackson 2020 side of our kind of work plan and discussion, is what is economic development? We had a couple of meetings early on that was the discussion. To me, while this is a static slide and we stole it from Area Development Magazine, it's a good indication of all the pieces and parts, and sometimes there's even some missing from those circles, about what could be a priority. Some of those things are obviously priorities. You can see highway access there, you can see skilled labor there. In smaller instances, financing might be the number one issue for a company. The challenge of managing this box is it's not a static box. I kind of have used the example that this is much more like nuclear reaction, where you have the atoms flying around and hitting each other, and you never know which one is more important or which one's going to create good heat or which one's going to create good energy or whatever. And our job and our challenge inside our shop is every project we deal with has this box with these things flying around and trying to figure out what's a priority, where do we get the resources to address them. You've been gracious enough as a county to help support us in doing that work, but I think as we move forward, we're going to need more of your engagement, and Mike and Steve have been very engaged, and we're very engaged in our meeting last week at the EG board about, we really have to step up our conversations on infrastructure and skilled training, because those are the two issues, the top issues, and there's no one group to look at to solve them. Those are community issues, and we have to work together on them. So appreciate your time this morning. Happy to answer any questions or observations that you have.
Commissioners, any questions of Tim? Steve?
Not really a question, but a statement, Tim, and I think the Enterprise Group has done a great job marketing what Blackman Township created when people like Dave Elwell and the supervisors out there in Blackman Township helped put together that LDFA. I think you should notice, though, that in less than 5 years, we completely filled that up. And I think we all remember Ray Snell standing up here telling us he was going to put that land aside and thinking he was a little bit touched in the head. But an example shows of what happens when you do plan. All of a sudden, people are interested and they're ready to come to Michigan and ready to go to work. And I think that there's some sites that the administrator will be bringing forward to us to challenge the Board of Commissioners to help us create some sites with vacant land that we currently own. And I think that there'll be some real opportunities for us to step up and help the EG make that site available and protect our businesses that are here in Jackson, because the EG brought up a very interesting topic. What do we do, not so much if a new company wants to come tomorrow, but if one of our companies chooses to consolidate here in Jackson, similar to what Plastic Gauge did, and says, we're looking for some land to do that, can you help us? And I really think that that's really what we should be paying attention to. Be ready, be mindful of keeping the jobs we have and helping our industry grow within its boundaries.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Next up is the prosecutor's biannual report. Gary Jarzinka. Debbie going to help you with your technology, Jerry? Or?
I need some help, yes I do. Thank you. Yeah. Good morning. I brought my desk. Yeah. That's it. And then right click to advance or left click? Yeah, all right, great. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Debbie. Good morning, Commissioners. Just want to give you a brief overview or update of the Prosecutor's Office this past year. Just an overview of the office. Basically, we have a total of 13 attorneys. In our main office, we've got 10 assistants, 7 support staff or legal secretaries, 2 part-time investigators who basically spend time on cold cases. Primarily, in our Victims' Rights Division, we've got 3 advocates, help victims who come and have questions or come to court. Also, our Family Division, we have 1 assistant prosecutor assigned to that, and also a support staff person, a part-time investigator. Currently, that office is located over on Lansing Avenue in the Health Department, front of the court building. Give you an idea about the cases we've had. Just this chart right here indicates 2014 and goes back to 2009. Last year, warrants reviewed, we were down probably about 400 warrants. So we're slightly down, but if you look at the numbers, basically going back to 2009, we basically are over 3,000 warrants a year that we review. Warrants that are authorized hover around 2,400, so we're pretty close to that. We're a little bit down from last year, but still it's a substantial number of warrants that are reviewed and authorized per year. The warrants that are denied, those are still reviewed, around 800. Warrants, cases reviewed per assistant, over 300. The next slide indicates just the breakdown of those numbers generally. Last year we had over 3,000 warrant requests that were reviewed. Approximately 2,300 were authorized, 818 denied, and in addition to that, we also do juvenile cases, and those have to be reviewed just like warrants, but they're called petitions. There were over 800 of those last year that were reviewed. One of the responsibilities we have in our office is that we have to assign an assistant to specialty courts. One of those is known as the drug court. It's called the recovery court here in Jackson County. We have to assign an assistant to that. That's time-consuming, the fact that that assistant has to appear in court twice a month on Fridays. They have a Friday session. They just had one this past Friday, which means they have to be there from approximately 1 o'clock to 3 or 3:30. They have a team meeting that usually lasts an hour and a half till 2 o'clock. Then they have a court session that goes from 2 to 3 or 3:30. In addition to that, that assistant has to be available to do screenings with the circuit judge, Judge Beebe, as well as the staff there to review applicants into the recovery court itself. That court basically is limited to felony defendants, primarily drunk driving defendants, but also deals with defendants who have drug addictions, also are potential applicants. But that assistant has to screen and review those individuals if they are applying to that recovery court. Last year, we had 133 cases reviewed, 72 admitted to recovery court, 40 were successful. I don't think those numbers really reflect the amount of time that's involved. That assistant prosecutor who deals with recovery court not only is assigned to a circuit court docket, in this case Judge Beebe, but also is responsible for those particular defendants to be familiar with those files and their history and those individuals, because as they work their way through the recovery court process, which normally is a year and a half, that assistant basically gets to know that defendant and the defendant's history much more than a normal defendant you'd have on a circuit court docket. Another specialty court that our office is responsible for staffing an assistant is the mental health court. I see that Judge Claren is here. Judge Claren's court handles the mental health court. This is a different assistant. Typically, it's the assistant who's assigned to Judge Claren's docket. We have two assistants, primarily one assigned to this court, and again, they are responsible for helping to screen a defendant who applies into the mental health court. Unlike the recovery court, the mental health court applicants can be charged with a felony crime or a misdemeanor crime, and typically one of the criteria is that their crime is directly related to their mental illness or condition. Last year, there were 80 cases reviewed for mental health court, 23 are admitted, and 10 successfully completed the mental health court. The prosecutor's office also is significantly involved in the Child Advocacy Center. This center basically is significant in dealing with the investigation and prosecution of sexual assault cases on children or minors. And basically it deals with what's called forensic interviewing of a child victim of a sexual assault. And what that means is it's very significant, actually, because in the distant past, if we had a child who we suspected was a victim of child sexual assault, they'd be interviewed by multiple people. The simple theory behind the Child Advocacy Center is that we have a trained interviewer of children who asked open-ended questions. The child is only interviewed once by this interviewer and not by a slew of people. And the intent is to basically not only help the child, but also streamline and help the investigation of these types of assault cases. And the Child Advocacy Center that we have here in town, last year we had 198 requests for interviews of child victims. Again, we have an assistant prosecuting attorney who has to be present for each interview that's done at the center. In addition, we have what they call MDT, or multidisciplinary team meetings, which the way this center works is that, let's say we have an interview of a child sexual assault victim today. Then the way it works is basically, let's say it's at 11 this morning. Well, the assistant prosecutor, the detective, the DHS caseworker, the director of the center, and also a therapist is present. They have a pre-interview meeting. Then they do the interview where the child's interviewed by the forensic interview. There's a mirror in which the detective and the assistant prosecutor and caseworker watch the interview. After the interview is done, then that team then meets and basically goes over the interview results. So it helps to screen out a case. It helps the prosecutor decide, do we have a good case here or not? Would this child be a good victim in court on this case? Do we have a disclosure of sexual assault? And whether we do or not, it's also a good opportunity for the child and the child's family to get some counseling services as well. We have found that our cases that we brought to court, especially in the last 2 years on child sexual assault cases, have been much, much stronger than in the past. And so typically we may get some pleas on cases, and if we go to trial, been very successful. So it's really been excellent. And this past fall, it was a big step for this center in that it got nationally accredited by the National Children's Alliance. And that's huge because not only one, we know we're doing things right at the center, but number two, then the center is eligible to receive funding from other sources, and which will make the center financially more viable going forward. We also have an appellate division. Jerry Scortmore is our chief appellate attorney. He's an excellent appellate attorney here in prosecutors' offices in the state of Michigan. Last year, he filed a number of briefs, as you can see, 9 district court briefs, 101 circuit court briefs, 77 court of appeals briefs, 29 Michigan Supreme Court briefs, and 22 federal district court and 10 United States Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals briefs. He argued 15 Michigan Court of Appeal arguments in 2014. The trials totals from 2014 last year with our assistant prosecutors. We had 25 circuit court trials. We had 34 district court trials. We had a total of 410 family court cases and 25 termination trials in family division. And that's a really nice, brief, short summary. But I can tell you on the 25 termination trials, we have one assistant prosecutor does our family court or abuse neglect cases, and that is extremely time consuming. Those are just trials, but that is a number that there's a number of other trials that occur as well. And moving on to the next slide, the abuse neglect assistant prosecutor. Basically, that prosecutor spends a minimum of 2 full days per week attending various hearing and trials, additional third day for jury trials. I know the commission is very well aware of the obligation of the county to DHS and foster care, but we've got 350 plus cases. In addition, the assistant prosecutor meets on Fridays with staff at DHS to help with trainings for various topics such as how to file a petition, what should be in a petition, what happens in trials, how to testify, all of those things. So the number varies between 325 and over 350. It's a pretty significant docket. It's probably one of our busiest dockets, and one that we've tried to make more efficient if we can, but there's quite a caseload there. This next slide just goes over to what we do, what assistant prosecutors do from district court, circuit court, or if it's abuse and neglect court or juvenile court. Typically pretrial conferences, preliminary exams, felonies in district court, motions, formal hearings, sentencing hearings. Last year in 2014, our office generated just over 8,500 subpoenas, which is a pretty significant number. But if you go to the prior year, we were close to 11,000 subpoenas that we generated. And why the difference? We've made some efforts to try to reduce the number of subpoenas we issue and having witnesses come in and with unnecessary expense. A couple things. One, we tried to be more efficient with our abuse and neglect docket as far as how we subpoena people in, trying to resolve cases at settlement conferences. And also, with our preliminary exams, there's what's known as a pre-exam conference on Fridays. We've adopted a procedure where we don't issue subpoenas unless we know an exam is going to go. For most cases, on the Friday morning, exams are scheduled the next week. So we found success in that as far as reducing the number of subpoenas. Reaching out to the community, once a month I hold a coffee meeting with citizens if they have questions at the Roxy Cafe. That's been successful. Some citizens have come forward if they don't want to meet in the office, if they have questions about cases or what's going on. In addition to that, serve on a number of different boards as indicated here. And again, the CAC. Also a member of the Prosecutors Association Cold Case Homicide Committee and the Corrections Committee as well. Community impact. We have established a juvenile violent crimes unit in the office. We've had a number of cases in the last couple of years with gun violence, especially with our youth in the community, trying to work with the sheriff and local law enforcement to reduce that. Also, we've been successful. We've assigned a prosecutor to work on financial scams of seniors and elder abuse. We do legal updates once a year in the spring for the police in the community. Also, we do help with the City of Jackson Police Department to help with their legal updates once or twice a year. This past December, we held a drug summit on prescription drug abuse and heroin use in the county at Jackson College. Very favorable response. We had over 210 people registered. We've already had one quarterly meeting. From the prosecutor's perspective, heroin addiction is definitely our number one drug issue in the county. The impact continued. We do also handle drug forfeiture cases for JNET, a local or undercover unit in town, the state police, and also the sheriff. We've worked with the local DHS director, Zoe Lyons, to reduce our costs and witness fees. Also, what's very helpful too with our office working with local law enforcement is that we've assigned a assistant prosecutor per police agency to work on warrant requests to streamline communication and make that system work better, and that's worked. And finally, trial teams. That's been quite effective the last couple of years in the sense that we have limited resources, and we want to, in our most serious cases, assign 2 assistant prosecutors to that case. Typically, you see that in a murder case or a very bad child sexual assault case. Our family division, assistant prosecutor Kim Graham. We have 1 support staff, 1 part-time investigator. If you look at their numbers, the past, especially last year, they're pretty steady. Down slightly. 2014, we had 456 child support orders established and 206 paternity cases established. That office, in meeting with parents, 2014 was up just over 2,000 meetings in the office with parents on those cases. So a pretty busy office. Victims' rights, probably one of the most important areas of our department because typically people who are victimized by crime, it's a very traumatic event. Normally they're not familiar with the court system because they're law-abiding citizens, and so when they come to court it's a big shock. It's not like TV or the movies. And so this unit really is very hands-on dealing with victims of crime. We have a waiting area on our floor, the 3rd floor of the courthouse, and so if they come in, whether it's for a counseling session or they want to know what's going on with the case, but certainly when they come to court, it's a comfortable area to wait. One of the victim rights advocate will take them to the courtroom to sit in the courtroom with them until they're done and then take them back and try to answer any questions they have. So that's been very effective. Last year, we notified just over 1,700 victims of their rights, just over 2,000 victims and witnesses in the waiting area. What's helped us with our notifications is that with technology, online, text, email, letter, they can register for court notification. We also do an annual tribute in the summer. We also do or actually in the spring, and then in the usually late summer, we handle at the park the memorial rededication for homicide victims. And then we also have a homicide support survivors group for the families of the lost loved ones meet as well. Victims' rights notification, just an idea about the numbers. You can see in the chart, 2014, 962, serious misdemeanors 546, and juvenile 274 as of last year. And here's a better number. The victims' rights as far as notifications and outcomes of proceedings. If you look at 2014, our actual of 5671. It is down a little bit on the number-wise just because of online notifications, but the volume of people coming into our victims' rights office has not changed. It's well used. And if you look at the next screen, it just kind of explains that. The MCVNN is basically that online program. The past year, we've had some outstanding results on some very serious cases. I just list on this slide, Camille Gamut, murder case, Josephus Anderson was a home invasion that was armed. Tariq Scott was the shooting after the Promise Bowl a couple years ago. Our 14-year-old girl was shot in the back of the head. Marcus Rutan, an assault with intent to murder case with a baseball bat by a drunken boyfriend and his girlfriend and her mom. Marlon Thomas Jr., another murder case. Jennifer Maynard, Michael Ettenberger, and Thomas Fleming were all serious child sexual assault cases. They were all successful prosecutions. The overview, these are the different courts that were responsible for covering the office, from district court all the way down to juvenile court and forfeitures. And just again, idea of the numbers involved. Threw in these civil infractions as their traffic tickets that the district court APAs also have to handle as well. So you can see last year was over 1,000. 725 mental health petitions, new juvenile petitions 691, new neglect and abuse petitions, and child support paternity civil lawsuits. Okay, and then a couple things that didn't make it to the PowerPoint, but that we are doing in the office here in 2015 is that in the past we've looked at ways to generate revenue for the office. We had approached the City of Jackson about doing their criminal prosecutions a couple years ago. We're still interested in doing that, but we were approached by Concord Township about doing their criminal prosecutions of their ordinances. We have drafted a contract and had discussions with it, although it's very small. My thought is that it's worth exploring. It will be on a very small scale how that would work, dealing in that kind of situation, with the hope that it would build to perhaps doing something like that with the City of Jackson. Other prosecutors' office in the state, some of them have separate contracts to do that with either a city or a township. So that's one idea we would like to certainly explore, even on a small basis. Yes,
Do you provide that service for any other township currently?
we do not.
Okay, so this would be
Historically,
a
we have
first.
not done that, so this is something that will be new.
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Leitner.
Do you know how many counties are currently doing that? Because I'm not sure of any counties close to here that the county prosecutor's office handles all the small town, or township stuff and city stuff. Because usually it's a private entity.
There isn't, I'm not aware of any prosecutor's office doing all of townships or all the city, and I certainly don't propose to do that.
Yeah, I don't mean
I
all the
don't propose to
townships,
do
but I
that.
just meant,
No.
are there any that are doing that now?
There are. St. Clair County, we basically have used their contract as a basis, as a sample contract, exploring this item with Concord Township. I know that Cass County does, I think Muskegon County. I think there's, in the state, probably, I at least know about a handful that are involved with that, but it's not something you typically see. That's correct.
Jerry, to be clear on that, that's typically for traffic-related offenses that you would prosecute,
It would
correct?
just be for criminal misdemeanors or traffic tickets. That's not representing the township on civil matters at all.
And was there conversation or thought of what that would do to the local receiving fees back, which currently happens now with their own attorneys?
Yes. It's basically would be a negotiable contract fee. For Concord Township, looked at what they paid their private attorney last year for, they didn't have a lot of cases, at 21 cases total of $1,500. So basically, our offer was to do that for a flat fee of $1,500, and depends if it goes up or down, we would look at that. But that's really pretty small. They approached me about doing that, and so that's where it's at. But certainly, if you looked at the city of Jackson, for example, their agreement with the county is that they keep a third of cost, and the county keeps two-thirds. Well, I believe a couple of years ago, the fees that they kept were roughly $120,000. Looking for the future, perhaps a couple of years down the road, would be my thought, approach them negotiating some type of contract. Maybe that fee would be split. We get 50% of that, so obviously 60, 70,000 is a pretty big chunk of money to be doing that. And the prosecutor's office, that's what we do. We prosecute cases. So we're set up to do that. We're set up to go to trial, unlike private practitioners who may represent a county or a township to do their ordinance violations. They're not set up to really go to trial very much because it's too expensive.
Jerry, is it a little bit different with the city? Doesn't the city prosecute their own domestic assault cases as well?
They do.
And you would not be doing that for instance, Concord Township, correct? Or would you?
We would do misdemeanor violations, and that's certainly be a misdemeanor crime, correct?
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions about that? Yes, Commissioner Leitner.
Not about that, about something else. On the specialty courts, what?
Yes.
Okay, I see that, like, this year, your success rate for recovery court was about 56%, and mental health court was about 43%. Do you have the numbers of prior years? Like, where is that in the trend? Is it, because to me, that seems low, I guess. And I do understand what is involved in recovery court, mental health court, and like I know Eaton County has, their other courts. And I'm just curious what the trend is there, because to me, it still seems low, even though it is a ton of work on.
I don't know if you can
for the
draw
defendant.
I don't know if you can draw a calculation from the percentage on there. Obviously, that's run by the court. Those are cases that we've seen and reviewed from our office. The judge involved with the recovery court, Circuit Court Judge Beebe, would have a better handle on, to answer your question on that. I can tell you from a prosecutor's perspective, we certainly are invested in time that we have to be there. We don't get any compensation for that, for spending that time on that case. Yes, that's correct. But I do know that what I've heard back from the judge is that there's been success as far as lowering the recidivism rate if a defendant goes through that program successfully compared to one who does not, as far as substance abuse goes. So, but she would have a better handle on those numbers than I.
Jerry, I had one question in the same area, actually. 40 successful out of 72. Can you explain, I guess mainly to the public, what happens with the 32 that are not successful? Have they entered a plea agreement, and if they don't succeed in recovery court, then they're pleading guilty to the original charge, or what's their status?
Yeah, if someone is not successful, well, let's say in recovery court, then they are subject to being sentenced by the judge. And as you know, just like any other felony defendant, it's based on what their sentencing guideline is. So the benefit for being in recovery court, or at least an incentive initially for a defendant, is you're not going to go to prison and you're not going to go to jail for a long time up front. Okay, so that's the incentive. You avoid that incarceration. But you've got to do a number of steps. You've got to jump through a lot of hoops. There's a very intensive supervision of that defendant, especially the first 6 months of the program. You're basically supervised 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You're subject to any kind of probationary searches anytime during the day. So there is work. There is a lot of supervision. Someone's looking over your shoulder constantly. So a lot of defendants don't want to do that. It's burdensome.
Okay. Commissioners, any other questions?
I just have one other thing I wanted to mention too. It's not on the PowerPoint, is that our office is going to create an economic crimes unit, hope to be open for business here later this spring. Basically modeling a great deal over the Eaton County Prosecutor's Office has a model like that. And basically it deals with bad checks, bad check collections. The way it's going to work is that our office will review cases for merchants for bad checks to see if we have a case. We'll do our due diligence. Can we prove the case? Do we have a copy of the bad check? If we have a case that we can charge and prove beyond a reasonable doubt, then for certain bad check writers, they would be offered a diversion, so they wouldn't be charged with a crime, but they would have to agree to do certain things, such as paying full restitution to the merchant, plus bank fees. They'd have to pay a diversion fee to the prosecutor's office. They may have to attend a class on economics. And if they're successful, then they would not have a criminal conviction. The merchant would be paid in full, and the program itself would be self-funded by the bad check writer. So that's in a nutshell what the program is going to look like. Obviously, there's more details than that, but it will benefit the county taxpayers in that they will not have to pay to fund the program, but yet it will be helpful to the merchants as well. So more details for that to follow, but just want to give you a heads up about that. Okay. All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jerry. Once you put it in, you can't have it back, Jerry.
What's that?
Kidding.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner.
Next up is the Circuit Court Report with Charles Atkins.
Thank you, Adam. You're welcome. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Good morning. That's hard to follow. A couple of things from what Jerry said. A couple of the questions from the recovery court. I can get you more statistics, and actually the success rate is higher than the 56%. What it is exactly, I can't tell you right now. But at an earlier, a couple years ago, we did have the recovery court team come in and present the program. And it's been 2004 is when Judge Nelson started it mid-year. And so we've been in business for about 10 years now. So we can give you a historical perspective of that program, where we are, where we were, where we are.
Okay. Most of those programs are run on grant monies, though, aren't they? I mean, most
Right.
of it.
Yep. We do have some local in-kind. We do have one person who is our local recovery court coordinator, and actually he's retiring in a week or so, and Judge Claren is going to have the benefit of his services for mental health court. So we're in the process of selecting a new person for that.
Charles, when you get those old numbers, could you send them to our administrator and he'll send them to the board?
I would be more than happy to. And we could even, if there was enough interest, make it maybe a study session presentation. So that would be up to the board. One element that Jerry, I believe, missed was he also has the delinquency docket, which also takes prosecutor time. So I just wanted to mention that on his behalf. And back to recovery court, we did have 6 graduations from the program last Friday. So, I'll answer any questions you have related to our caseload numbers. You know, they're kind of cyclical. Total case load for 2014 was just under 6,800, about 500 cases lower. Most of that was related to just a decrease in civil case filings. Why that is, I'm not sure. We're continuing to try to increase our use of technology. I think most of you will remember that we were lucky enough to get state funds to get video conferencing hookups in all of our courtrooms and out at the youth center too. And that has helped to reduce the number of transports that we have to do, and we're doing a lot of the initial hearings of juveniles who are picked up over the weekend at night from the youth center itself, our preliminary hearings. But we're also working on some other uses for the video conferencing equipment. We're working with IT and some other SCAO on that too. I'll answer any other questions.
Charles, looks like the cases were down slightly over 13 total cases.
Total cases were somewhat similar to 2011, and again, it ebbs and tides, and why they do that, I'm not sure. Part of it could be economics. How cases are charged, as Jerry was saying.
Okay, Commissioners, any other questions of Charles? Okay, Charles, I think we're set. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is the District Court Quarterly Report. And there's a link on the board docs to the website with all the reports on it. Judge?
Please don't shoot the messenger here. Tammy is in Alabama watching her daughter participate in collegiate softball. I'm Mike Claren, I'm the Chief Judge. At the onset, I would like to thank the Commission for the faith that they've put into our court with our reorganization plan. And I can assure you that your faith has not been misplaced. We've already started some of the construction on the second floor, building the cubicles, and hopefully in the very near future, once we get the furniture moved, we'll have the collection agents located on the second floor. More problematic is going to be the movement of the criminal clerks to the first floor, because there's going to be more substantial reconstruction. As Commissioner Elwell indicated, there is a link on the internet relative to our reports. That's good, because I'm a Luddite. I don't have much technical expertise, and I can't present a fancy PowerPoint presentation, especially since I'm a late-minute draftee. In terms of the financials, which I think that you folks are most interested in, for 2014, on the expense line, we were right at where we should be. No problem there. In terms of the revenue, and I'm rounding off, revenue was down. This is the bad news. There is some good news. Revenue was down about $150,000. And there are two primary reasons for that. Number one was the Cunningham decision, which came down last year and was fortunately remedied by the state legislature. But there was a number of months where we were not able to assess court cost, and we did provide, and I'm assuming Tammy did provide the Commission at that point in time, or at least Mr. Overton, I believe, with an estimate of what it would cost the county in terms of revenue, and I believe that estimate, because I was involved in figuring that out, was between $30,000 $40,000 a month. The second reason, and this dovetails with what the prosecutors indicated and what Mr. Adkins has indicated, is there is a significant drop in the cases. And could be a statistical anomaly, could be the economy getting better, the economy getting worse. If you want to, check with the guys that authored Freakonomics, they got their own ideas as to why there can be a change in criminal activity. We were down total approximately 7,300 cases. Our caseload, I believe, in 2013 was approximately 43,000, reduction down to 36,000. Don't hold my feet to the fire on this, but it's my recollection in looking at some statewide figures that cases are down everywhere. Whether it's a reallocation of police resources, a change in charging decisions, we have no way of knowing, and obviously have no way of controlling. Nevertheless, from, excuse me, I have a cold. From a budgetary standpoint, Ms. Bates has advised me with a transfer from drunk driving assistance to the district court's general budget. There will be no request from the district court to the commission for a amendment to our budget. So there should be no concerns there. The good news, if you look at our reports in their entirety, is that our collections in 2014 were up almost, well, it was $195,000. Those are aged accounts receivables. For some time now, we have been tweaking internally our procedures. We have an excellent collections department, but you can always get better. And I can't say that there is a direct causation between our tweaking and the increase in funds received, although I would certainly indicate there is a correlation. And if you were to push me, yeah, I would say there is a cause and effect. But we haven't stopped there. I did something unusual last year, and I asked the state court administrator's expert in collections to come down to audit our department and to give us their recommendations. We have their recommendations, and as the year progresses this year, we're going to undoubtedly implement, not all, but I suspect a substantial number of those recommendations, which I expect to result in a continued upward trajectory of collection receipts. Revenue is good for the county, but from the court standpoint, fines and costs are assessed as a result of criminal behavior or civil misbehavior. And if you don't pay the fines and costs, you're getting a freebie. And for the rest of us that pay our dues when we make a mistake, I think it's appropriate to go after those that ignore their consequences. I am available to answer any questions, although I am merely the messenger here today. I would like to comment briefly. Commissioner Leitner had some questions about the specialty courts. If you were to ask our probation head, what is the success rate, generally speaking, for probationers in district court, it'd be around 70%. The success rate, at least per the statewide study, which was done on mental health courts about 2 years ago by a professor from the Michigan State, is I believe, between maybe 40 and 55%. I'll get you a copy of that report. And you might think that that is very low. But take a look at the population we're dealing with.
Right.
Yeah. These, I
Just
know,
didn't know what the standard was, because I've not seen any data on standards, basically. So
yes.
that's why I
And
wanted to
so,
know.
not having, when you're dealing, and I can't speak directly to recovery court, and I don't want to say you're dealing with the worst of the worst, but you're dealing with people, you know, Joe Schmo in the general public probably has 3 personal problems. Our folks have a dozen. For example, 90% of the people in my court are in substance abuse treatment, 9 out of 10. I would say over half have significant problems with housing. I would say over half have qualified for SSI benefits. And so the diminished success rate, I wouldn't be concerned with that. Actually, I think that that's what is to be expected. And if you can successfully complete 4 out of 10 people, when you calculate the cost of those citizens over the entire system, it's quite a savings. And even for those that do not successfully complete, there's a strong belief, and I hold that belief, that even those that don't successfully complete the program are operating on a higher plane than when they came into the program at the onset. And you're certainly free to attend any mental health court sessions. They are open to the public. I hadn't given a lot of thought to this. When we do have visitors to our treatment team meeting, there are certain waivers that need to be signed, but I think you could probably participate in the treatment team session as well. But I'll get you a copy of that statewide report. It's approximately 2 years old.
Okay, I just wanted to compare stats, you know, basically, it's not that I am, you know, knocking on the program.
Oh,
but
no.
it's like baseball, you know, if a batter's batting 500, that's freaking awesome, but, you know, we don't expect them to bat 750 or 1,000, so it's kind of the same.
Right, you have to set the bar appropriately, but I think that's a perfectly legitimate question to get a vantage point of, you know, is the program making any difference? And I've been doing it since 2008. It's very time intensive, but I do believe it makes a difference. If I didn't, I wouldn't do it.
Judge, I had just one question or point, really. I don't really expect an answer from you, but on the courthouse security report, it notes on guns, I guess, caught by security, there were 17 of them last year and 17 the year before. I'm curious about that, and again, I don't expect you to have the answer, but are they people that have CPLs that just didn't realize they could not bring them into the courthouse? And I guess what is the sequence that happens there? I just think that's a high-risk thing, obviously, if somebody plans on doing harm, and I'd like to know more about that, I guess.
I will direct that to Ms. Bates,
That's
but
fine.
I strongly suspect that those are guns which people are otherwise lawfully carrying. And
It'd be comforting to know that if that's the case.
yes, well, it'd be comforting to me, too.
Yeah.
But I will follow up on that. I assume if someone tried to truly illegally carry a gun into the courthouse, I think that would be a blast throughout the courthouse, and that is something that we would have been made aware of.
Yeah, and the sequence of what happens to them, or I guess what they do to inquire about that, if they find somebody coming through the magnetometer that has one, do they inquire about a CPL or just turn them away, or what do they do? I guess I'd like to know.
I will follow
Okay.
up on that.
And that's all I have. Commissioners, any other questions of the judge?
Thank you so much, and I'll
Thank
get
you.
to that report.
Next up is the Chamber of Commerce. When I looked last night, there was nothing with it, and I see nobody here. You're taking this presentation, Mike, you said, or?
No.
Oh,
No, while we do have representation on their board, I'm not doing their presentation today.
I kind of knew that.
I'm not exactly
Putting you on
sure
the
why
spot.
they're not here, but I'll make inquiry.
Very good. Sheriff, you're up next with the memo of understanding with, I guess it's pronounced EasyNet.
Sure, sounds good. Good morning. We're looking for our permission and authorization to participate in this project with a number of adjoining counties, and it's simply a cost exploration or a research to figure out what exactly this is going to entail, how much it's going to cost, and how would these vendors propose to tackle this. So simply, we're looking to establish a network designated for public safety answering points or 911 centers. And that can do a couple things, and it's very similar to what's in the Upper Peninsula, but it can link the 911 centers, since everything is mostly IP-based these days, and it also creates a conduit or the ability to, from the calling public to transmit and receive a number of platforms of communications to a 911 center, whether it be voice, video, text, etc., because it's certainly not available now. We can receive the data with the new 911 products that we have. There's no way to transmit it through an infrastructure. So Calhoun County Centralized Dispatch Authority set out on this project, and then there was a significant interest from adjoining counties and a number of other counties, so it turned into approximately a 10-county block. Most of our neighbors are involved, and they are trying to affix what this is going to require and how this would be done. This memo of understanding is simply a desire for us to participate in this exploration project. And as I listed in here, there is no cost associated with this at this time. When the next phase moves on, after they've established what it's going to take and how much this would cost, that would be when we'd have to make the decision, do we still want to participate? And then obviously that would be brought before you all.
Undersheriff, looked like a good group of counties. I noticed that I think Hillsdale was in there, but Lenawee was not.
Yes, and that was my error. Lenawee is in there. They are exploring it.
Okay, good. And then my last point, looks like a great idea. Is it possible we could actually see the MOU before the board meeting? Maybe it could be attached to board docs? I don't think the MOU was actually there, was it?
I don't believe so, and my apologies, the administrator's office has that MOU.
Great. Commissioners, any questions on it? Hearing none, we'd be looking for a motion to send this on to the full board.
Support.
Motion and support, questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, the same. Motion carried.
Thank you.
JC Dot, simple procedure looks like for authorizing the board chair to sign the cover sheets for the 2014 road certification book.
Yeah, pretty typical event every single year. We have to do this for the state of Michigan. It just indicates the number of miles of roads we have in the county. We have one cover sheet that covers the entire county, and then one cover sheet just for the urbanized area, which was changed last year, and that's why that process really took a little bit of extra time. So if Chair Shotwell brings his ink pen to the meeting next week, and things should go through pretty good there. And we, every Act 51 agency has to do this. So you have 83 counties and over 500 cities and villages that have to prepare one of these books that goes up to the state.
Okay, we'd be looking for a motion to send it to the full board. Support. A motion and support, questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, the same. Motion carried. Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
Parks, Cascades renovation, Part 2, Phase 1. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Just for the benefit of the two new commissioners, welcome, first and foremost. Back in July, we had an opportunity to put out a request for qualifications for a consultant to come back and work with us to begin Phase 1 of the restoration of the Cascades. Derek Huff is our project manager from the Spicer Group, and he has been hired. They created engineering drawings for the beginning of the demolitions, and as of December 15th, the demolition of the wall began. We had a nice ceremony down at the site. The wall was removed, and the amphitheater itself, which is all the asphalt and the material down below that, was removed, and same with the seating that was there, which is currently now stored over at the fairgrounds. One nice thing that was a benefit of that is we had local contractors from our community come out and perform that work all in-kind services, so there was no charge to us. Approximately, he'll have better numbers later, about $200,000 worth of work is what they did for us. It was an amazing, amazing day. Actually, it was about a week for them to do that. Then just recently, we put out a request for proposal for what I'll call Part 2 of Phase 1, which is now what you see there. If you drive by the Cascades, the site is open. We want to then now bring it back to what it needs to be so that we can open up the facility for May and throughout the course of summer like we normally have done. As of January 30th, there were 4 companies that put in proposals: Bailey Sand and Gravel, Jules Swartz and Sons Excavating, Dunnigan Brothers and Mead Brothers, and Bailey Sand and Gravel became the lowest and best bid at $208,599. And this information is contingent upon, obviously, the approval of the Agency and Affairs Committee, the County Board of Commissioners, and that'll be contingent for the following day after next Tuesday. On Wednesday, we'll meet with our Parks Board, and I see no reason why that will not pass, and then we can move forward with getting a contract ready to get Phase 2 going when the weather breaks around March 1st, and have the completion of the entire Phase 1 substantially done by May 5th, and then no later than May 5th, and then no later than final completion by May 19th. That'll give us an opportunity to have it ready to go for the public, whether it be some celebration opportunities that we have with the public, but also to our Memorial Day fireworks. So I'm looking for an approval so that we can go into an agreement with Bailey Sand and Gravel to begin the construction and site restoration phase of the Cascades renovation project at a cost of $208,599, contingent upon the agreement and approval by the Jackson County Park Commission.
Mike, it's not listed as going to the full board, does it? Yes? Yeah, that's what I kind of thought. So we'd need to send this on to the full board. We'd be looking for that motion. And any questions of our speaker?
I first have a question, and that is, this $208,000 is part of the initial money that has been raised already, correct?
That is correct, and it also includes dollars that we received through grants through the Sigmund Foundation, Weather Wax, and the Jackson Community Foundation.
Motion to recommend we send this to the full board for approval.
A motion and support. Additional questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, the same. Motion carried. Thank you.
Very, very much.
That completes the committee items. Next up, we have claims. Be looking to pay the bills. Motion and support. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, the same. Motion carried. You have the other minutes, the March reporting schedule, and we're back to public comments. Public, if you'd like to speak, you have 3 minutes if there's anybody here, and I see none. Committee member comments. Hearing none, we're adjourned.